What if one day you woke up and decided that the world needs saving by a knight in shining armor? Even if the armor is rusty, the horse is half dead, and the dragons are just windmills. Is it madness? Or is it a dream the world desperately needs? In a quiet corner of La Mancha, Spain, there lived an old gentleman named Alonso Quijano, a simple man, a little strange perhaps, but harmless, living a peaceful life in his little village. That is, until his mind cracked like an eggshell. You see, Alonso was obsessed with stories of knights, dragons, damsels in distress, and epic quests. He read so many books about these chivalrous knights that he began to believe he, too, could become one. And then one day, because of an excess of romantic novels, he snapped. He went into his attic, pulled out a dusty set of armor, and transformed himself into Don Quixote de la Mancha, a noble knight-errant whose mission would be to revive chivalry in a world that had long forgotten it. He christened himself after the Spanish word for clever, though most people thought the name meant something else entirely. Then he needed a horse, and there stood poor Rocinante, skinny as a rake and twice as old. But to Don Quixote, he looked like a magnificent steed fit for a knightly quest. Finally, he needed a squire, someone to help him on his adventures. And he chose his neighbor, a simple farmer named Sancho Panza, with his wife and family worried sick. Don Quixote handed Sancho a wooden club and said, "My friend, the time has come for us to go forth and seek adventure." And so they left, the idealistic knight and his anxious, very confused squire, riding towards the sunset to find their fortune. But it wasn't long before they ran into trouble. On their way, Don Quixote came across a group of windmills, and he was immediately struck by their resemblance to those gigantic wind-powered monsters found in descriptions of exotic lands. "Behold, Sancho," he cried, "what a monstrous giants!" His squire looked over and saw, well, some windmills. "My lord," Sancho replied cautiously, "those aren't giants, they're windmills." Quixote waved away the idea. "No, no, Sancho, do not deceive yourself. Those are giants, and I, Don Quixote de la Mancha, shall slay them and cut off their heads." And so he charged forward, lance raised high. But upon getting closer, he discovered, yes, they were windmills, not giants. And he, Don Quixote de la Mancha, was covered in dust and slightly embarrassed. But the show must go on. After all, Don Quixote had a reputation to uphold, and who knows what other giants might be lurking around the next hill. After recovering from his battle with the windmills, Quixote and Sancho decided to stay at an inn, but our hero couldn't see past the fantasy. To him, an inn was nothing less than a castle. The innkeeper, a fat, jolly man, played along, bowing and scraping as Quixote entered. As for Sancho, he soon found himself in the kitchen arguing about politics with a barber while eating a piece of bread that tasted suspiciously like sawdust. Meanwhile, Quixote, dressed in his best armor, strode through the common room, greeting imaginary courtiers and squires. And then he met a young woman who happened to be staying at the inn. She was traveling with her brother, who was, as it happens, dressed like a knight. And Don Quixote assumed she was a damsel in distress. "Fair maiden," he boomed, "doth trouble find thee? Sayest thou?" The girl looked over her shoulder and gave him a sharp look. No, thank you," she said politely. Don Quixote, confused by her answer, decided that the only logical explanation was that she was in disguise. In his mind, he was sure that under that rough exterior beat the heart of a noble lady waiting for her knight in shining armor. And who better than he, Don Quixote de la Mancha? Unfortunately, he wasn't the only suitor. Her brother, seeing the foolish knight pining after his sister, decided to teach him a lesson. He challenged Don Quixote to a mock joust, which resulted in the knight losing his helmet, his dignity, and maybe a few teeth. When he returned to the common room, he found Sancho in deep conversation with a couple of men who had heard about his exploits and come to have a look. They asked him why he was such a poor knight, to which Sancho replied philosophically, "My lord is a good knight, but he fights against giants and windmill monsters that only he can see. He's quite skilled, actually, but there aren't many opponents brave enough to face him." As it turns out, those words were prophetic. The three men turned out to be highwaymen who ambushed and robbed unsuspecting travelers. And they decided that Don Quixote would be the perfect bait. "We will leave your squire here with you, good Sir Knight, and then approach the pretty little lady ourselves," said the bandit leader with a sinister grin. But Don Quixote saw right through them. "Oh, you lowly knaves," he cried. "You may have fooled everyone else, but I am not so easily tricked. Come, Sancho, my faithful squire, let us depart from this wicked company." And he led his companions out of the inn, back onto the open road. As days passed into weeks, Don Quixote's delusions continued. He fought imaginary foes, rescued non-existent maidens, and talked to peasants who looked like kings and queens. But not everyone was so amused. One night, while camping, Quixote was awakened by the sound of singing. Assuming it was a band of evil sorcerers trying to lure him to his doom, he grabbed his sword and charged into the forest. There he found a group of young men and women dancing around a fire. When they stopped singing and saw a man in rusty armor charging at them with a sword, they were understandably shocked. And when Quixote reached them, still screaming about evil sorcerers, they thought he was crazy. Well, crazier than usual. Eventually, they convinced him that he was mistaken and that they were just having a simple picnic. "If you want to join us, we won't stop you," said one of the girls. But Quixote, ever the knight, refused. He told them he had a duty to protect the innocent and fight the forces of darkness. Then he spent the rest of the night guarding the sleeping villagers, who probably dreamed of brave knights. During their travels, Quixote and Sancho met all kinds of people, some who laughed at Quixote, others who pitied him. Some tricked him, mocking his idealism. But Quixote remained steadfast, never giving up his quest to make the world a better place, even if it meant fighting imaginary dragons and rescuing non-existent princesses. Years passed, seasons changed, and Don Quixote grew weaker. His armor, already battered and dented, became more and more worn. His horse, Rocinante, once a proud steed, now resembled nothing so much as a stray dog. But still, he rode on, driven by a dream that refused to die. One evening, as they sat around a campfire, Sancho turned to his master and said, "Why do you do this, my lord? Why pretend that you're a knight when everyone knows you're not?" Don Quixote looked at his humble squire, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "Because, Sancho," he said softly, "it doesn't matter if the world doesn't believe in magic. As long as I do, the magic still exists." And then he fell silent, staring into the flames. In the final chapters of his tale, Don Quixote, broken and weary, finally wakes from his dream. He realizes that he's not a knight. He is Alonso Quijano, a simple man from a simple village. But as he lay there, weak and dying, he smiled. For he knew that even though his quest had failed, his dream had made the world a better place, if only in his mind. Because in the end, it's not whether we win or lose that matters, but how we choose to see the world. And for Don Quixote, the world was full of magic, adventure, and above all, hope. This story isn't just about a madman on a horse. It's about believing in something bigger than yourself, even when the world calls you crazy. It's about holding on to your dreams, no matter how impractical they might seem. So ask yourself, are you seeing windmills, or are you missing the giants? Like this story? Subscribe for more timeless tales told like never before. Because the world needs more dreamers, even if they ride broken horses.